part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Let me guess, you're ready to get serious about your goals and you're looking for accountability support, but you don't have the time or the tolerance for chit-chat. You're busy balancing work and life and home and bullshit, and your to-do list isn't getting any shorter. You've been talking about making that career leap, finishing that creative project, kicking that bad habit, but you simply don't have the time and the energy to invest in yourself. I get it. You, my friend, are a busy bitch. What if I told you you can get maximum accountability with minimal commitment? Productivity without punishment? Uproar Coaching's Busy Bitch program brings you all of the good stuff you get from a weekly hour-long coaching session, minus the conversation. Here's how it works. Each Friday morning for 5 weeks, you'll receive an email with 3 prompt questions. Take just 10 minutes to answer those questions. By Monday, midday, you'll receive a personal reply offering support and challenging the limitations you're putting on yourself. Listeners of the Books with Brooks podcast get 10% off Busy Bitch by using promo code P3 at checkout. That's the letter P and the number 3. Visit uproarcoaching.com to learn more. It's that simple. Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm here today to discuss our October book, October 2022, Pet Sematary by the legendary Stephen King. And I'm thrilled that my friend Beth is here to talk about it with me. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Brooks. What an introduction.
You're my biggest Stephen King fan, I think, in book club. So having you here to talk about this is thrilling.
Wow. Well, I feel very famous.
You're very famous. We picked Pet Sematary this month sort of democratically, which is not always how we choose books. But it seemed like book club just sort of was like, yeah, let's read Pet Sematary. But I think you suggested it probably. Does that sound right?
No, I didn't. I didn't know. I did not suggest this one. I thought you did, but
I didn't.
Yeah, I thought you said Pet Sematary at the last 2 weeks. I mean, I had never considered reading this one. So
no, me either.
So somebody must have suggested it.
Yeah. It felt really like unanimous. Like everyone was just sort of like, oh yeah, let's read that. And I was like, okay, here we are. Because we always do something spooky for the month of October. Well, anyway, somehow we ended up here. And I have felt great about my Stephen King journey, which kicked off 3 years ago or 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago when we read The Shining, which was my first ever Stephen King that I remember reading anyway. And since then I've read, I don't know, probably at least 5 more Stephen King books. And so I would consider myself like a fan at this point. I really like his writing style. His storytelling style is amazing. At your encouragement and a couple other people I read, 1122 63. Thank you.
Yes. Bunch of numbers. Yes.
Which was a remarkable book. We could do a whole separate podcast on that one. But anyway, all to say, I was excited to dive in to another Stephen King. Pet Sematary would not have been my first choice, but I'm glad we read it.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a plot rundown?
Sure. Pet Sematary takes place in Bangor, Maine, where most all of his books take place. It's about Lewis and Rachel, a married couple with their daughter. Oh, shoot. What's her name? Ellie?
It is Ellie. It's Ellie.
And Gage, the son.
Yeah.
And Lewis is a doctor. He's just accepted a position at a university as a university doctor. And they move into this big home across the street from this old man, Judd, and his wife, Norma. And Judd and Norma have lived outside of Bangor for 100,000 years. And they're very friendly to the family. And they kind of become close right away, Lewis and Judd, and they kind of sit and have beers together every night. And essentially, Judd sort of shows the family something that's on their property, which is a path that leads to quite literally a pet cemetery, which is spelled incorrectly because the kids of the town for decades have taken care of this plot of land where they have.
Okay. And I have always wondered about that with this
Mhm,
book, about why it's spelled this way. So
mhm.
getting to that part, I was like, oh, like that was a real moment of revelation for me. Um, Similar to like red rum in
Mhm.
The Shining. So, anyways, yeah, Pet Cemetery is spelled wrong because the children like made a sign for it and they didn't know how to spell cemetery in like 1950 or whenever they made the sign. So good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so basically it's kind of described as this really like kind of sweet, serene, definitely spooky, but like really, nostalgic kind of place where the kids have buried their pets for decades. Um, and it's definitely a little weird. Rachel, the wife, is very like very anti-death talk. She doesn't really like talking about death. She doesn't like her kids thinking about it. And the family has this cat, Winston Churchill, that they call Church, this black cat. And seeing the pet cemetery, they're sort of like, Ellie has to deal with, well, is Church really going to die? Like, would that ever happen? Anyways, long story short,
And it is
and
kind
this
of,
is a long
it's a
story.
long story. Yeah. This book is like 400 pages roughly.
Mine was 543.
Really? So it
Yeah.
must depend on the version or the
Yes.
printing. I have a
Yes.
really old copy from 1989.
Oh, amazing. So spoiler alert, in case you want to read it, Church does die. And he happens to die when the rest of the family is visiting Lewis's in-laws in Chicago. And Lewis basically he's over at Judd's house for Thanksgiving, and the cat has died, and Judd is basically like, do you love your daughter? Do you want her to like be like happy and have her cat back, basically? He doesn't make it that clear, but Judd takes Lewis back up to the cemetery, pet cemetery, and then beyond into this even creepier path that is above this kind of pile of sticks. I can't remember
I think they
what do they
call it
call
the
it, Brooks?
deadfall.
The deadfall, yes.
Yeah.
So they kind of go beyond the pet cemetery and up this other path, and then up these stairs to this seemingly like burial ground, and they bury the cat up there. And then, of course, the next day, what comes waltzing into Lewis's home?
Stinky
But
Church.
stinky Church. So basically, they brought the cat back to life, but back to life is in parentheses here because the cat's not the same, right?
Yeah.
The cat is like a zombie cat, basically.
Yeah, he's really clumsy. He like kills a lot of mice. He smells bad. He's sneaky.
Yeah, he's different. Maybe a little evil, but not quite, but like maybe. Um, so you can kind of sense where the book is going, which I actually enjoyed in this story a little more than I normally do, but um double spoilers. Their son Gage ends up getting hit by a truck on the busy road that is outside of their home. And as Lewis has thought about this in the past, he basically becomes obsessed with bringing Lewis back to life, or Gage back to life, by burying him at this Micmac burial ground, which he has learned a little more about throughout the course of the book and talking with Judd and learning more about the history of this burial ground. And the story kind of goes from there. I mean, you can imagine the kind of history that this burial ground has had, and Judd tries to explain to Lewis what he's getting into by even considering this idea and what has happened in the past. And it's just a really interesting conversation on death. And I think the back cover of my book has the quote from the book, sometimes dead is better, which I think is a very thematic phrase for the book.
Yeah. Great summary, Beth. I think you hit like all the main points. I was surprised by this book as someone who's never read it and who has avidly avoided any of the movies or like adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be like an army of undead animals
Mm-hmm.
marching
Mm-hmm.
around wreaking havoc and scaring people, and I never liked that because like growing up, I mean, we had like a million hamsters die, lots of birds, we had a pet cemetery in our backyard, and
Wow.
this book was written before I was born, so this book has existed my entire life, and I've always sort of been aware of it and been afraid of it, and like I'm such an animal lover, which is all to say that wasn't really what this book was. The
No.
only undead animal you really deal with is Church,
Right.
and he's really kind of fine. I mean, he, like you said, he's a little weird, he's like a little off, but mostly he's just stinky.
Yeah.
So I was happy with that. I didn't want a bunch of pets to die.
Right.
I didn't
Right.
have to read about that.
And I kind of wondered that about that too, Brooks, because I thought, if this book was really about like dead animals, like I don't think it would be as popular as it is. So I wasn't surprised that it turned in a different direction, but I was a little worried as well.
Yeah. And not that I liked where it went instead necessarily,
Right, right. Agreed.
but I was happy it wasn't a bunch of dead pets. Which leads me to ask, Beth, did you like the book? Yes or no?
Okay, my answer is yes, but it's a tentative yes. I think many there were many parts that I enjoyed, and there were many parts that I didn't enjoy. And this is the first Stephen King I've read that I was a little more iffy on than his
Yeah.
other books I've read.
Interesting.
But ultimately, this book really scared me, and I think that that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. That's hard
Yeah.
to do. I think that's
Yes.
hard. Unfortunately, I did not like the book. And I've come across a couple Stephen Kings that I didn't like, so that's not as unusual for me. But I just thought it was a little too disturbing.
Yes.
And it was a little too descriptive when it came to the death of a child, and then unburying the dead child and getting its body out of a grave and hauling the body and wrapping it in tarp. Like it was really, really heavy.
Yes.
In those sections. And it was kind of like, all right, we get it. He's going to dig him up. Yeah. Okay. But we spent like 4 chapters reading about this grave robbing experience.
Yes.
In fact, have you watched any of the Dahmer series on Netflix? I know it's kind of controversial.
I have, and it's extremely disturbing.
I think it's kind of like it made me feel sort of similarly to this. Like I've only watched a few episodes of it, mostly because I get to a point where I'm like, I gotta stop.
Right.
I gotta stop. This is too much. It's like, ugh, like I can't. And it kind of felt the same with this book. Like
Sure.
it was too too detailed and like too accurate.
Yeah.
Or something. And I just didn't want all that. I just didn't want it all. So that was my biggest critique. I also, and people talked about this at book club, but I did feel, and this is I think common with Stephen King, the pacing was really off. First 3/4 of the book, kind of nothing happens. I mean, not a lot happens. A lot of foreshadowing. We learn a lot about their lives. We learn a lot about the townspeople. We learn a lot about the like sort of the legends. But until Gage dies, and honestly, even then, really until he starts digging Gage up, there's not a ton of action. And then
So
and then it happens real fast.
Everyone said that, and I don't disagree that there were times that the book is slow, but I actually really liked the beginning, and I really liked his experience with Victor Pascow. I thought it was spooky, so I don't know. I liked reading about the town and everything. I thought that it had an ambiance that was very unsettling to me.
Yes. No, it definitely did, which is Stephen King's like absolute. I mean, that's what he's best
Yeah.
at, right?
Yeah.
Spooky ambiance.
So I don't know. I mean, I hear people when they say that. To me, I kind of more agree with what you said. Like, by the time we knew that he was gonna, do what he was gonna do, I was like, oh my gosh, can I get to the part where he does it and see what happens? Like, I don't need to read 100 pages of him doing it, but it was spooky.
Let Let me guess, you're ready to get serious about your goals and you're looking for accountability support, but you don't have the time or the tolerance for chit chat. You're busy balancing work and life and home and bullshit, and your to-do list isn't getting any shorter. You've been talking about making that career leap, finishing that creative project, kicking that bad habit, but you simply don't have the time and the energy to invest in yourself. I get it. You, my friend, are a busy bitch. What if I told you you can get maximum accountability with minimal commitment? Productivity without punishment? Uproar Coaching's Busy Bitch program brings you all of the good stuff you get from a weekly hour-long coaching session, minus the conversation. Here's how it works. Each Friday morning for 5 weeks, you'll receive an email with 3 prompt questions. Take just 10 minutes to answer those questions. By Monday, midday, you'll receive a personal reply offering support and challenging the limitations you're putting on yourself. Listeners of the Books with Brooks podcast get 10% off Busy Bitch by using promo code P3 at checkout. That's the letter P and the number 3. Visit uproarcoaching.com to learn more. It's that simple. What part scared you the most?
So the parts that scared me the most were when both times that they walked through, like after getting over the deadfall, they kind of walk through this foggy sort of, I don't know, almost like underworld kind of situation where Judd is like, don't, look ahead. Don't listen to anything. Don't look at anything. It's loons, or it's St. Elmo's fire, which we talked about at book club, but it's like, and you get the sense that he's super close to like very dangerous and scary things. And that was really eerie to me.
Yeah, that part was scary. When the Wiggum, what? Oh, shit.
The Wendigo.
The Wendigo, thank you. The Wendigo is like this like mythical creature that they say lives in the Maine woods, and if it touches you, it makes you a cannibal, like makes you go crazy. And so he has an encounter with the Wendigo. I agree. I thought that part was really scary. I liked a lot of the parts where they're walking in the woods at night and it's so scary. And I sort of think that I wish I had read this in more of a rural setting, because reading it in my Chicago apartment that's like never really dark, like I don't know, it didn't hit me. I think if I'd been in the woods, I would have been like, oh shit, like this is so scary.
Sure.
Because you sort of forget like what darkness really feels like and how scary it is and how it affects like the sounds that you hear, and you can't tell where they're coming from. They sound like they're right behind you. Your eyes start seeing things as they adjust to the dark, like all of those things which really happen and are really scary. But I haven't experienced those in a long time, just given my lifestyle.
Totally. When I was finishing the book, it was like a really kind of rainy, windy night, and the trees were like hitting our windows, and it was so spooky. It was, and Tim was out, my husband was out doing a show, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah, not great to read Stephen King Home Alone. No, in general, probably. So I hope you learned a lesson.
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't. I'll continue to do this. You know what? Something we didn't talk about in book club is the first sentence. Let's talk about it. We didn't talk about this. Lewis Creed, who had lost his father at 3 and who had never known a grandfather, never expected to find a father as he entered his middle age. But that was exactly what happened. Although he called this man a friend, as a grown man must do when he finds the man who should have been his father relatively late in life. That's the first sentence. It's quite long. It has an ellipses in there, many commas.
Yes.
It's a long boy, but that's our first sentence. What do we think of that?
It's funny because I did actually think about this a few times, because I think that I misread the sentence. I think that I thought it was more literal than it ended up being. Like, there was a time in the beginning of the book where I thought Judd was his actual father, and like we were going to find that out. But yeah, that
would have been a good twist.
Yeah. Yeah. Like hearing it back,
surprise, I'm your dad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Hearing it back, like I think it's a good first sentence. I think it sets up like a key relationship in the book.
It does. And it sort of makes me reflect now, reading it again after having finished the book, how much maybe a theme of this book is like a father's love or the
Sure.
relationship between father and son.
Yes.
Because I think we see sort of both of them, Judd and Lewis, going as far as a person can go for their son, whether that be their biological son or sort of like surrogate son.
Yes.
Like you'll do anything for your son as a father. And that sort of is like the driving motivation for basically all the choices that are made in this book.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Interesting.
It's really sweet.
I really had a soft spot for Judd.
Yeah, me too.
I like really liked Judd a lot. He's just like this sweet old man who's just like kind of getting drunk on his porch every night. Like, all right, here I am. Come on over any old time. Like, it was really is from another time. He like invoked these sort of small town like nostalgic feelings for me, and I liked him a lot.
Yeah, and there's like a really common like horror trope that you move into like that you move next to like neighbors who are creepy or weird or like
Yes, especially when they're
evil.
old.
And
Yeah,
like I love that Judd is kind of has all these creepy weird secrets and stuff, but he's kind and good and he has no judgment. Like he has warmth for the family immediately and it's welcome, you know.
yeah. Like when he first came over and brought them that, like they first get to the house and the kid has been in the car for 10 hours. The kids are having meltdowns. They're so tired and he can't find the spare set of keys that he hid in the
Yeah.
car.
Mm-hmm.
And then Judd comes over and he's like, oh, I got a key. Like I'll go grab it. They gave it to me in 92 or whatever.
Right.
92, 72. I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's bad. This old guy's got a key to their house. Like, what else has he got? Like, what else? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I kind of thought it was going to go that way where he was going to turn out to be creepy, evil old man.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't. And you're right. It was like pretty refreshing.
Yeah.
Even though his choices, I think, are questionable. And there were some times where he was described as having like sort of an evil glint in his eye or like extra brightness in his eyes. And like, I think that was like the Pet Sematary's like influence on people. Like you sort of couldn't escape it. It has this energy.
Yes.
So at points he maybe was like a little bit evil, I guess, but not like overall.
Yeah.
You mentioned the creepy old neighbors. Like what other like now really famous horror tropes did we see in this book? Can you think of any others?
I mean, definitely like old homes, you know, that like have seen life and have been lived in and like like the dirty footsteps on, you know, that you're like, oh, someone's been here kind of thing. And like this sort of foreboding woods that if you cross some threshold, well, you go from safe to dangerous. And then definitely like dreams and visions, that kind of thing. And I mean, I think in general, like the book kind of has all of them and kind of has none of them because it kind of is its own, it's truly its own story. You know, it's not a haunted house or it's not like, it's a very unique story, but the way it's set up is like so spooky and has like definitely influenced, I think, a lot of what we watch and see in this genre.
Yeah. Well, and I remember when I first started reading this, I was talking to Jake about like, is this the origin of this like Indian burial ground thing that we have in our culture? And I think the answer is no. Jake and I did a little like looking. There's stories that predate this one that have that same idea. And I think like, I mean, obviously cemeteries always have had that sort of haunted connotation, of course, and that comes from Europe and well before America was founded. So I don't think it was the origination of that. However, I do think this book, I mean, I remember as a child, like anytime you found like a creepy spot in the woods, you'd be like, oh, it's an Indian burial ground. It has to be like,
sure.
Though that myth persisted even amongst us as children. And I think we can probably credit this book to making that so very popular.
Yeah. And I mean, it definitely like, with all Stephen King, it definitely brings up like the topic of how dated these books are. I mean, I think this book, I don't think quite crosses over into sort of racist tropes as much as some of his other ones do. But,
Right.
it was written at a
Yeah.
different time, and that's not an excuse, but it is definitely like a time capsule of like things that we thought were absolutely appropriate, and ways that we talked about women even, and gender and sex and all of that. It's very dated. And I was
Yeah.
thankful, because at first when they started talking about the Indian burial ground, I was a little worried. Okay, are we going to go into some territory that feels, uncomfortable or icky? Which I don't think is wrong. I mean, I think we need to acknowledge, like, okay, there's a lot of things that have changed in this time, but I think Judd sort of remained respectful to the sort of myths and legends, and they definitely explain that, like, the land was not necessarily taken in a righteous way, like, or in a correct
Right.
way. By they talk a lot about who owned the land and who's
Yes.
rightfully the owner of the land. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it was a little easier to digest than some of maybe like the gender tropes that were in the 70s were totally fine, and now it's like, yeah, 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 again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Also, this book has a at least one sexy sex scene
Oh
between the wife and husband, which I know you said like is the first time you've actually read a sex scene in a Stephen King book. So that
yeah,
was kind of a standout.
it really surprised me, because I've read a lot of Stephen King, and I have never read any, like, like detailed sex scenes in any of his books. And I have no problem with sex scenes, but it just really shocked me, because I thought, I have a handle on this writing style. Like, I know, he might allude to it, but he's never gonna. And then all of a sudden we're talking about, details, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa. Here we go, Steven.
I felt
Steven.
I honestly felt I felt embarrassed in a way, because I felt like I know this author, like, and I was like,
Yeah.
Stephen, yeah, like, what? Like,
Bad boy.
put that away. Like,
Yeah. Well, I read somewhere, I don't think this is commonly known, but Stephen King, like, almost didn't publish this book because he
right,
thought it was like too disturbing.
which it
Um,
is.
which it really is. And I think our culture has evolved a lot, probably since 1973 when this book was written, but it is very, very disturbing. Yeah, I kind of get it. Like, I kind of get where he's coming from, although I think it was fair to publish it, and like I don't think I'm scarred forever by reading it or anything.
Oh, and I also, I think I said this at book club, like, I think it does a really nice. What I love about Stephen King is that there is deeper meaning in all of it. He's not just trying to freak you out. Like, this book talks
Yes.
about death in a way that is really meaningful and
Mhm.
very powerful, if you allow yourself to think about it, which I think is his whole point.
Yeah. There is a quote I like in the very beginning. It's sort of a foreword. It says, "Death is a mystery and burial is a secret."
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. Okay, we only have a couple of minutes. So I want to end on this question on page in my book, my copy, very old copy, starts on page 288. So Lewis is contemplating, like, can I really go through with this? Can I, like, really go dig up my dead son and try to bring him back to life? And it
Mm-hmm.
says, how could he refuse to take the chance available to him? This one unbelievable chance. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that for me, like, I think Stephen King did an amazing job, and a lot of horror stories don't, because you're just like, no, don't do that. You're yelling the whole time. You're like, stop, don't do that. Don't go in there. Don't stop, run, like, whatever.
Right.
But he really, like, the motivation is there.
Yeah.
And I read that and I thought, well, shit, I'd do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't anyone? It sort of made it like, even though it's the wrong choice and you're not rooting for it, you're like, he's got to.
Yeah.
Like, he's got to do it. And
yeah,
I
think
love
the reader feels as compelled as he does in that moment.
Yes. You're like, it's going to be fucked up. It's not right, but it is this one unbelievable chance to pierce the veil between life and death and to do it for your child. You got to try it. You got to do it.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
Powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Beth, we could talk about this book all day.
I know.
As always, what a journey. I'm so glad that you could be here to talk with me more about Stephen King.
Anytime.
What a joy.
Anytime, Brooks.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, have a great week. We move into the month of November. Our November book is going to be Let's Not Do That Again.
Let's not.
I don't have the author in front of me, but I will make a separate announcement. Let's Not Do That Again. I believe it's loosely political, which was chosen in honor of Election Day.
Yeah, coming up.
Soon.
Vote.
Remember to vote.
Yes, go vote.
I have my ballot right here at home, in fact, that I still need to fill out.
Amazing.
I will do that. Everyone else, go and vote. And happy reading.
Happy reading.
Books with Brooks is produced by Mo Barrow with theme music by Jonathan Allen. Books with Brooks is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality professional shows that inspire and entertain. If you've been dreaming of hosting your own podcast, we can help. Please email content@pressplaypodcast.com to get started today. Please be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.